There are moments when irritation appears before you even have time to think. A gesture that feels off, a tone that sounds wrong, a presence that unsettles you for reasons you can't fully explain. Your body reacts first. Your chest tightens, your breath shortens. Your mind starts moving faster than your awareness can keep up. Outwardly, nothing dramatic has happened. Inwardly, something has been disturbed. This disturbance is rarely random. It is not simply about manners, personality, or differences in taste. It is not just about impatience or mood. Irritation has a deeper origin. It is one of the most honest emotional signals the psyche produces because it bypasses politeness and self-image and goes straight to the raw material beneath. Irritation emerges when something external touches something internal that has not been fully understood, accepted, or integrated. It is the friction between what you see in the world and what you carry within yourself. Most people are taught to deal with irritation by suppressing it or justifying it. They learn to explain it away, to blame the situation, to label others as annoying, ignorant, selfish, or immature. They convince themselves that the discomfort comes from outside, that it belongs to the other person, and that peace will return once that person changes or disappears. But irritation rarely dissolves that way. It lingers, it repeats, it finds new targets. The same emotional heat appears again and again, triggered by different people, different settings, different words. The surface details change, but the internal reaction remains strangely familiar. This repetition is the clue. Irritation repeats because it is not trying to harm you. It is trying to reveal you. Carl Jung captured this truth with unsettling precision. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This does not mean that all behavior is acceptable or that boundaries are unnecessary. It does not mean that harm should be tolerated or excused. It means that the intensity of your reaction carries information about your inner world that cannot be accessed any other way. Irritation is a signal sent from the unconscious to consciousness. It is a demand for attention, a request for honesty. What most people call annoyance is often unacknowledged pain. What they call judgment is often disowned desire. What they call anger is often fear wearing armor. The psyche does not speak in words first. It speaks in sensations, tightness, heat, urgency, resistance. These sensations appear before rational thought because they belong to a deeper layer of experience shaped by memory, learning, and survival. Irritation arises when that deeper layer recognizes something familiar but unresolved. This is why irritation feels personal, even when the situation is small. The reaction is not proportional to the event because it is not about the event. It is about what the event activates. The mind may try to make sense of it quickly by constructing a story. It points outward, it assigns blame, it creates certainty. But beneath that story, there is usually something far more vulnerable trying to surface. A fear of being dismissed, a memory of being shamed, a wound related to control, abandonment, invisibility, or worth. The irritation is the cover, the deeper emotion is what matters. Many people spend their entire lives trying to avoid this moment of recognition. They distract themselves, they stay busy. They scroll, they numb, they intellectualize, they spiritualize, they turn irritation into identity and call it discernment. But avoidance has a cost. What remains unconscious does not disappear. It gains autonomy. It begins to shape perception, relationships, and choices from behind the scenes. The person feels reactive, exhausted, misunderstood, and constantly disturbed by others, without realizing that the disturbance is an internal dialogue that has never been completed. As long as irritation is treated as an enemy, it will continue to dominate. As long as it is blamed on the outside world, it will repeat. Something changes only when irritation is recognized as a message rather than a threat. That recognition marks the beginning of awareness. Awareness does not remove discomfort instantly. It does not promise calm at all times. What it offers is something more powerful: clarity. Clarity creates space between stimulus and response. Space creates choice. Choice restores dignity. Without awareness, irritation controls behavior. With awareness, irritation becomes information. This shift does not happen through force. It happens through attention. And once attention is brought inward, the deeper journey begins. Not everything irritates you equally. Some behaviors barely register, others strike with precision. This difference is not accidental. Two people can witness the same action and experience completely different emotional reactions. One remains calm. The feels attacked. The external event is identical. The internal landscape is not. This reveals a fundamental truth about emotional life. Events do not carry meaning on their own. Meaning is assigned through internal structures shaped by experience. An interaction only becomes painful when it encounters something already sensitive. This sensitivity is formed early. It develops in moments when emotional needs were unmet, when expression felt unsafe, when certain traits were discouraged or punished, when survival required adaptation rather than authenticity. Over time, these adaptations solidify into patterns. The psyche learns what to show and what to hide. It learns what is acceptable and what is dangerous. It learns which emotions lead to connection and which lead to rejection. The parts that are deemed unacceptable do not disappear. They retreat into the unconscious. Jung referred to this rejected territory as the shadow. The shadow is not simply negative or destructive. It contains everything that did not fit into the identity you were allowed to develop. Strength that felt threatening, sensitivity that felt risky, anger that felt forbidden, confidence that felt unsafe, need that felt shameful. These qualities are not eliminated. They are exiled. Once exiled, they begin to appear outside the self. This is the mechanism of projection. Projection is not a flaw in character. It is a function of the psyche attempting to maintain balance. When something is disowned, internally it is encountered externally. This is why irritation often targets specific traits. Arrogance may provoke intense reaction because it mirrors suppressed pride or unresolved shame. Neediness may trigger discomfort because it reflects denied dependency or fear of burden. Laziness may anger because it confronts exhaustion that was never allowed rest. Sensitivity may irritate because it touches vulnerability that had to be hidden to survive. Confidence may provoke hostility because it awakens desire that was learned to be dangerous. The external behavior becomes a carrier of internal conflict. This does not mean the other person is intentionally provoking you. It means your psyche recognizes something in them that it has not reconciled in you. The irritation is the moment of recognition. Another layer often exists beneath the shadow: the wound. A wound forms when an experience overwhelms the psyche's capacity to process it. It remains open, sensitive, reactive, even neutral. Stimuli can feel threatening when they brush against it. An unhealed wound seeks protection. It wants control, predictability, reassurance. It shapes behavior around avoiding pain rather than pursuing truth. This is how many identities are formed. Being agreeable to avoid conflict, being competent to avoid criticism, being strong to avoid vulnerability, being detached to avoid disappointment. These strategies create stability, but they also create rigidity. When someone enters your life with an energy that contradicts these strategies, irritation arises. The wound senses danger, the body reacts, the mind mobilizes defenses. The reaction feels justified because it feels necessary, but necessity does not equal truth. The truth is quieter. The truth is that irritation marks the edge of awareness. It is the point where unconscious material attempts to enter consciousness. This is why irritation feels uncomfortable. It threatens the existing self-image. It destabilizes certainty. It demands reflection rather than reaction. Most people choose reaction. It is faster. It preserves identity. It protects familiar narratives. But reaction keeps the cycle intact. Reflection interrupts it. Reflection does not ask who is wrong. It asks what is being touched, what belief is being challenged, what fear is being activated, what memory is being echoed, what part of the self feels endangered. These questions do not weaken you, they strengthen you. They move power from the outside world back into the inner world. When irritation is examined rather than obeyed, it begins to lose its charge, not immediately but gradually. Each moment of awareness reduces its grip. Over time, patterns emerge. You notice the same themes repeating across different relationships. You recognize familiar emotional sequences. You see how certain reactions are automatic rather than chosen. This recognition is the beginning of freedom, because what you can see, you can work with. What you understand, you can integrate. What you integrate no longer controls you. This is not about becoming indifferent. It is about becoming conscious, and consciousness changes everything. Many people believe that emotional strength comes from distance. They withdraw, detach, and avoid. They reduce contact, limit vulnerability, and call it self-protection. Sometimes distance is necessary. Harm should not be tolerated. Boundaries are essential. But distance alone does not resolve internal patterns. It only removes triggers temporarily. The underlying sensitivity remains. True emotional stability does not come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from understanding it. Jung's work emphasizes integration rather than suppression. Integration means allowing all parts of the psyche to exist within awareness, without acting them out destructively or denying their presence. Integration does not mean approval, it means recognition. The process begins with attention. When irritation arises, the first step is noticing it without immediate interpretation. The body reacts before the story forms. Paying attention to the physical sensation interrupts automatic identification. The second step is observing the narrative that follows. The mind labels, judges, and explains. These explanations feel convincing because they are familiar. The third step is redirecting attention inward, not to analyze endlessly, but to ask what the reaction protects. Protection is always the motive. Even destructive reactions are attempts at safety. What is being defended? What feels threatened? What feels exposed? The answers are rarely intellectual. They appear as sensations, memories, or emotions. This inward movement feels uncomfortable because it removes the external enemy. It reveals vulnerability. It exposes dependence, fear, or longing that had been carefully hidden. This exposure is where resistance appears. Resistance takes many forms: minimization, rationalization, distraction, judgment, control. Resistance is not failure. It is a sign that something important is being approached. What is resisted persists. This is not a metaphor. It is an observable psychological law. Emotions that are rejected gain intensity. Traits that are denied appear exaggerated in others. Needs that are suppressed become demands. Acceptance does not mean surrendering to impulse. It means allowing awareness to include what was excluded. When a disowned trait is acknowledged, it no longer needs to be projected. When a wound is recognized, it no longer needs constant defense. This is how irritation transforms. It shifts from a command to react into an invitation to understand. Understanding does not eliminate conflict, but it changes its nature. You respond rather than react. You choose rather than obey. The result is not emotional numbness, it is emotional stability. Stability does not mean nothing affects you. It means nothing overwhelms you. You can feel irritation without becoming it. You can feel anger without losing control. You can feel hurt without collapsing. This capacity emerges from integration. Integration produces a core that is not dependent on external validation or control. It does not require others to behave correctly in order to remain intact. This is what people often describe as being unshakable, not because life stops testing them, but because the tests no longer determine their identity. The irony is that this internal work often improves external relationships. When projection decreases, communication becomes clearer. When wounds are tended, boundaries become cleaner. When self-understanding deepens, tolerance increases without self-abandonment. Others sense this shift. Some respond with respect. Some respond with discomfort. Some attempt to provoke old reactions. This is natural. When someone becomes less reactive, they change the emotional system around them. Old dynamics lose their energy. New ones must form. This transition can feel lonely. But loneliness at this stage is not isolation, it is differentiation. It is the separation between living unconsciously and living with awareness. There is a moment when this understanding stops being an idea and becomes a decision, not a dramatic declaration. A quiet commitment, a decision to stop outsourcing emotional stability, a decision to stop blaming the world for internal reactions, a decision to notice rather than judge. This decision does not remove pain. It changes your relationship to it. Pain becomes information rather than threat. Irritation becomes guidance rather than command. The external world remains unpredictable. People remain imperfect. Loss, rejection, and misunderstanding continue to exist. What changes is the center from which you meet them. Living with awareness means recognizing patterns as they arise. It means noticing when old wounds are activated without letting them dictate behavior. It means responding from clarity rather than impulse. This practice is ongoing. Some days, awareness arrives early. Some days it arrives after the reaction. Both matter. Each moment of recognition weakens the unconscious pattern. Each moment of responsibility strengthens the conscious self. Responsibility here does not mean self-blame. It means ownership. Ownership restores power. When you own your reactions, others lose the ability to control you emotionally. Not because you become invulnerable, but because you become grounded. Grounded people are not easily manipulated. They do not need constant reassurance. They do not require agreement to feel stable. They still care, but they are not controlled by what they care about. This state is not achieved through detachment from life. It is achieved through deeper engagement with the self. And it leads back to the core truth. Everything that irritates you carries a message. Everything that irritates you points inward. Everything that irritates you can become a teacher. When this truth is lived rather than merely understood, irritation loses its authority. The world no longer dictates your inner state. Your inner state no longer depends on the world. This is not immunity. It is maturity. The end of reactivity is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of awareness. And awareness, once chosen repeatedly, becomes a way of life. A life that is quieter, a life that is clearer, a life that is less reactive and more real. This is not the end of irritation. It is the end of being ruled by it. This is the beginning of wholeness. There is a brutal honesty hidden inside the way irritation chooses its target. It doesn't always aim at the loudest person in the room. It doesn't always attach to the most obvious flaw. It often locks onto something subtle, something ordinary, something that wouldn't bother you if it didn't carry a hidden meaning. And that meaning is never only about the other person. It is about the place inside you that still aches, the place inside you that still tries to control, the place inside you that still fears being exposed, the place inside you that still believes certain emotions are dangerous. That is why irritation is so revealing, because it exposes the exact point where your inner world is still unfinished. People love to believe that their irritation is proof of intelligence, proof of standards, proof that they see through others, proof that they are more aware than most. But when irritation becomes a pattern, it is rarely wisdom. It is a wound speaking. A wound does not ask politely. A wound does not come with clarity. A wound comes with urgency, heat, and a demand for immediate relief. That relief usually arrives through one of three defenses: judgment, control, withdrawal. Judgment says, they are the problem. Control says, if I manage this perfectly, I won't have to feel this. Withdrawal says, if I disappear, I won't be touched. All three feel like strength. All three are rooted in fear. And fear is not weakness. Fear is information. Fear is your system trying to keep you safe based on what it learned in the past. This is the part that changes everything. Your nervous system is not reacting to the moment. It is reacting to the meaning the moment activates. That meaning was shaped long before today. Some irritation is born from shame. Shame is the silent belief that something is wrong with you. Not, I made a mistake, but I am the mistake. Not, I did something, but I am something. Shame creates a constant background tension. It makes you scan for criticism. It makes you interpret neutral expressions as judgment. It makes you assume you are being evaluated. When you carry shame, people who seem confident can irritate you. People who take up space can irritate you. People who speak without hesitation can irritate you. Not because confidence is wrong, but because it highlights the place in you that still fears exposure. Shame also flips into the opposite. It can make you irritated by people who seem fragile, emotional, or needy, because their vulnerability looks like a threat to your survival strategy. If you learn to survive by not needing anything, vulnerability feels dangerous. You may look at their openness and feel disgust, impatience, contempt, not because they are weak, but because your inner world still believes softness equals risk. Some irritation is born from envy. Envy is rarely admitted. It hides behind morality. It disguises itself as critique. Envy says, they have something I want. But the mind rewrites it as, they don't deserve it, because that feels safer than admitting desire. Envy can appear when someone is free in a way you are not, when someone rests without guilt, when someone speaks their mind, when someone is loved without overperforming, when someone takes care of themselves and doesn't apologize for it. Envy is painful because it confronts you with what you've denied yourself. And denial is the core of the shadow. The shadow is the part of you that holds what you rejected. To be accepted. Some people rejected their anger to be loved, so they become irritated by people who are openly angry. Some rejected their ambition to belong, so they become irritated by people who succeed. Some rejected their need for closeness to avoid disappointment, so they become irritated by affection, intimacy, dependence. Some rejected their power because they were punished for it, so they become irritated by authority, leadership, confidence. The shadow is not evil. The shadow is exiled life, and what is exiled seeks a return. It returns through projection. Projection is one of the most misunderstood forces in human psychology. People think projection is simply seeing yourself in others, but it's deeper than that. Projection is the psyche placing an internal content outside you so you can perceive it without the shame of owning it. You can't accept it as me, so you experience it as them. That is why projection feels so certain. When someone carries your projection, you don't feel curious. You feel convinced. You don't think, maybe I'm sensitive to this. You think they are unbearable. And that conviction is exactly why projection keeps you stuck. Because conviction closes the door to awareness. This is where the key question enters again. Why does this irritate me? Not, why are they like this? Not, how do I fix them? Not, how do I avoid them forever? Why does this irritate me? The answer is never a simple sentence. It unfolds in layers. First layer, the behavior. Second layer, the meaning you assign. Third layer, the feeling underneath. Fourth layer, the memory or belief connected to that feeling. Fifth layer, the part of you that learned to survive by suppressing something. This is why irritation is a doorway. It is the psyche pointing toward an integration that must happen if you want to stop living reactively. And here comes the truth that often hurts. The person you call annoying might be carrying a disowned part of your life. Not because you want to be like them, not because you admire them, but because your reaction is teaching you where you are incomplete. There is another painful layer to this. Sometimes what irritates you about others is not a trait you disowned. It's a trait you had to develop under pressure. A child forced to be polite becomes irritated by directness, not because those traits are inherently wrong, but because they threaten the internal contract you made to survive. That contract sounds like this. If I do everything right, I will be safe. If I'm good enough, I won't be rejected. If I control myself, I won't be shamed. Refuse to please. And your system reacts. It calls it irritation, but beneath irritation, there may be resentment. Resentment says, I did everything I was supposed to do, and it still hurt. How dare you be free from the rules that trapped me? That is a devastating realization, because it reveals that sometimes performing. Irritation becomes a guard standing at the gate of that grief, because grief is too vulnerable to feel in public, so irritation shows up instead. This is why simple advice never works. Just ignore them. Just don't care. Just be confident. These phrases fail because they treat irritation comes from awareness. And awareness begins by understanding what your irritation is defending. What is it defending? Often, it is defending a wounded identity. A wounded identity is an identity built around pain. I'm the one who gets overlooked. I'm the one who has to be strong. It's fighting for survival, and the mind strengthens the story. They always do this. No one respects me. People are selfish. Everyone is fake. The story feels like truth because it matches an old emotional pattern. This is the trap, because the story becomes not in them. The power is in the unconscious pattern inside you. This is why Jung's sentence is not motivational, it's diagnostic. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It is an invitation to stop living in surface-level blame and start to transform your life. Transformation begins with one thing, the courage to look inward without lying, not with blame, not with superiority, not with a mask, with honesty. And honesty begins by admitting that irritation is not only about them, it is about the echo inside you. In the next part, the shift. Stronger than the impulse, nothing outside you can control you the way it used to. At a certain point, irritation stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling familiar. Not familiar in a dull way, familiar in a revealing way. You begin to notice the sequence. The body reacts, the mind rushes to explain, simply the absence of immediate obedience to the reaction. This pause is where awareness lives. Without it, irritation becomes action. With it, irritation becomes information. Most people never experience this pause because they have been trained to identify with their reactions. They believe that moments when choice was limited. Awareness introduces choice where habit once ruled. This is where transformation begins. not by changing the world, but by changing your relationship to your inner responses. The mistake many people make is trying to eliminate irritation entirely. They treat irritation as start observing it. Its structure becomes visible. You see how quickly the mind builds a narrative. You see how that narrative is shaped by memory, not reality. You see how certain assumptions appear automatically. You see how the body reacts before the story feels real. This observation weakens. Move through the sky. This shift does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You become less likely to say things you regret, less likely to project meaning that isn't there, less likely to escalate internal tension into external conflict. And more importantly, you begin to understand yourself. Understanding your ownership returns power. When you stop believing that other people are the source of your emotional state, you reclaim control without needing dominance. This is why awareness feels destabilizing at first. It removes the familiar enemy. It dissolves the comfort of blame. It exposes vulnerability. Awareness asks you to stand without armor. That is why people resist it. They confuse armor with strength. They confuse numbness with peace. They confuse distance with freedom. But armor is heavy. Numbness is empty. Distance is lonely. Awareness is different. Themselves. This groundedness does not come from superiority. It comes from familiarity with their own inner terrain. They know where they are sensitive. They know what activates them. They know which stories are old. They know when a reaction belongs to the present and when it belongs. Validate your emotional reality. You stop needing to be understood immediately. You stop trying to control how others see you, not because you stop caring, but because your sense of self no longer depends on constant external confirmation. This is where boundaries become natural, not rigid. They ignore their discomfort. They silence their needs. They override their intuition. They perform stability. They pretend not to feel what they feel. Irritation often appears at the exact moment self-abandonment becomes unsustainable. It is the psyche's way of saying, something here. Integration means you no longer need the world to carry your shadow for you. You reclaim what was disowned. You acknowledge what was suppressed. You allow what was forbidden to exist consciously. This does not make you reckless. It makes you whole. Wholeness reduces reactivity because there is less internal gets to them anymore. Not because nothing happens, but because there is no longer an open wound for everything to strike. That wound was not healed by avoidance. It was healed by awareness. Awareness does not erase the past. It changes how the past lives in you. When old patterns are life, the constant background tension softens. The need to defend decreases. The urge to prove fades. You become less interested in winning interactions and more interested in remaining aligned with yourself. Alignment becomes the new measure of strength, and alignment is quiet. It does not announce itself. Presence allows you to notice when irritation is trying to pull you into an old identity. Presence allows you to choose differently. Presence allows you to remain yourself under pressure. This is not a personality trait. It is a practice, and every practice has setbacks. Some days are honesty. Honesty with yourself creates integrity. Integrity creates stability. Stability creates freedom. This freedom does not come from changing others. It comes from no longer being internally controlled by what others do. At this point, irritation has changed roles. It is no longer its most important turn. Because awareness, once practiced, becomes an identity. Not an identity built on reaction, but an identity built on clarity. In the final part, this clarity settles into something lasting, a way of living that no longer depends on emotional armor, a way of moving through the world, not because people have changed, not because irritation has disappeared. It settles because you have changed the place from which you respond. Irritation still appears, but it no longer pulls you out of yourself. It still rises, but it no longer defines you. It still signals, but it no longer commands. What once felt like simply passes through your awareness, and this shift is not dramatic, it is quiet, almost invisible to others, but internally it changes everything, because you are no longer trying to protect yourself from life. You are no longer trying to control how people behave. Rooted in the integration of your shadow, rooted in the understanding of who you are beneath reactions. From this place, irritation loses its authority. It no longer escalates into resentment. It no longer turns into rumination. It no longer builds silent walls inside you. Instead, it's been reclaimed. The old identity it once reinforced has softened. This is what integration looks like in real life. You still feel, but you don't spiral. You still notice, but you don't obsess. You still encounter difficult people, but they no longer dismantle your inner balance. Because balance no longer depends on it, allows you to speak without aggression. Clarity allows you to be silent without shrinking. This is not emotional armor. It is emotional coherence, and coherence changes the way you move through the world. You become less reactive and more intentional, less defensive and more honest. It is not isolation, it is maturation. You no longer bond through shared irritation. You no longer connect through mutual blame. You no longer need enemies to feel defined. You begin to connect through presence, through calm, through awareness. And here is where the journey completes the problem. Unawareness was. When awareness takes its place, irritation loses its grip. The world no longer decides your inner state. Other people no longer control your peace. Old patterns no longer run your life from the shadows, not because you are untouchable, but because you are in these patterns. Let that awareness move outward. Share this with someone who has been struggling in silence, someone who feels constantly triggered, someone who feels controlled by reactions they don't fully understand. Leave a comment with the words, "I choose awareness."